All right, peace and blessings, and welcome to another episode of the Author Spotlight Self-Publishing 30 Days podcast. I'm your host, Rob YB Youngblood. I serve as the president of sales for Self-Publishing 30 Days and your LinkedIn locksmith because of my ability to unlock the power of LinkedIn for authors. And I'm excited to have Nate Evans Jr. with me. Nate, how you doing today, brother?
Oh, man, I'm blessed, man. I'm blessed, and I'm honored to be on the platform with you and just chop it up, man. So thank you.
Oh, listen, the pleasure is mine, man. Whenever I get a chance to get around some really sharp, ambitious brothers and sisters, I got to make sure I put them in a position to increase their visibility, credibility, and profitability, man. So this is your show. Give you an opportunity to shine. But before we get into your book, before we get into those other things, tell us, who is Nate Evans Jr.?
Yeah, man. Nate Evans Jr., man. I like to tell people that I create experiences for apprehensive teens to feel worthy when they're waging the war in their mind. Simply put, I'm a husband, I'm a son, author, speaker, mentor, and mental health advocate.
I love it. I love it. Where are you from originally? Because everybody's from someplace. You know, I'm originally from the Bronx, but where are you from originally?
So I'm originally from New Jersey. I'm actually still in Jersey, South Jersey to be exact. People are familiar with Atlantic City, so I like to say Atlantic City because I lived there for a long time. But I actually grew up in a very small town called Pleasantville, right outside of Atlantic City, probably like 10 minutes apart. So that's where I'm at down in South Jersey.
I love it. Yeah, my wife is from South Jersey, so whenever we talk about anything Jersey, you know, you got to either tell them that you're off the Turnpike or off the Garden State. So my wife like to tell people she's off exit 2 off the Turnpike, a place called Glassboro, which is about 15, 20 minutes outside of Philly. So, so tell us, how has your background in terms of where you're from, how has that, helped you to become who you are today?
Yeah, my background, man, really just growing up where I grew up, the environment, at the time, it was very traumatic. It caused a lot of different traumatic things within me, anxiousness, depression. But looking back and really connecting the dots, I realized that I had to go through certain things so I can actually be empathetic and impact people who are in those positions now. Because I believe that you can't really relate to somebody unless you have that experience. You know what I mean? So I had certain experiences that were super challenging, but I was able to overcome and get to the other side. And now it's like, hey, I know what you're going through. I know what that feels like. And let me show you what this can be on the other side. Like, you don't have to stay here in this place. You don't always have to struggle mentally and emotionally. Like, there's another side. And I know because I'm on that side. Right. So I believe God walked me through that process, but it definitely molded me into who I am today. And I didn't realize that when you're going through it, it's just rough. You know what I mean? You're just like, yo, what is going on? But once you really get to that other side and you begin to start serving, you realize that there was a purpose in all of those tribulations.
Yeah, no question. I think, it's funny how you learn life situations looking back, right. And it's not until maybe you get a mentor that you can probably see things moving forward. Tell us a little bit about your book. Give us the name and what prompted you to put your book out there.
Yeah. So it's actually 2 books. The main one that I utilize when I'm in schools is Building Muscle, Life is Your Trainer. That book is somewhat of a biography on myself, but what it is, it's my journey from my senior year of high school up until my graduating year of college. Now, for those that don't know, I actually went to 5 different colleges, bouncing around from place to place. And the backstory was me constantly running from my emotional and mental challenges. I'm like, yo, I'm just go to a new place. Everything going to be good. I'm going to go to this place. It's going to be good. But the reality is, everywhere you go, there you are. And I talk about that journey throughout this book. And I also have added practical lessons within the book for people to apply. So when I'm talking to students, I go in and I'm able to give them these very practical lessons to apply to their life, because these were the things that I needed when I was going through my journey. So it's really just breaking them down into principles and points. And we call them keys to building muscle. And you just literally apply those. I learned that on my journey. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back and connecting the dots, I'm like, oh, okay, I see what was happening here. I was gathering all of these different things to come back and now teach. So that's that book. And then my other book is I Love You, and that's Letters of Love from Black Men to Black Boys. That's actually my first best-selling book. Praise God for that. And that book is really specific on adding value and helping young Black men and young Black boys and even grown Black men to understand our worth, our value, and for us to feel seen and feel heard.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Let's stay there. Let's talk about that one. I Love You. I think that's so important. I grew up fatherless boy. My father was murdered when I was 2. So there's a gap that comes into the lives of a young man who doesn't have his father. What was the biggest challenge for you writing that book?
Oh man, that's a deep one. The biggest challenge for me writing that book, the biggest challenge, man, was really being able to get the point across of being empathetic and adding value without throwing a bunch of like sympathy in the book. You know what I mean? Like really encouraging and empowering without making us feel like victims.
Right.
With this book. That was my biggest thing to recognize us off the back. Like, yo, you're a king. I want to let you know that from the beginning. I don't want you to think of yourself as someone of this low value. And this is why I'm doing this. I'm just here to simply remind you of your king status. So that was the biggest challenge, but I believe we got that message across.
Yeah, that's good, especially when you say best-selling. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, people are picking up copies. So you're a 2-time author. Mm-hmm. What was that process like in even putting your first book together? Because we're talking to aspiring authors. We're talking to authors that are going through the process now. What was it like going through that process in the beginning? Your first book. I mean, what was your experience like?
Yeah, my first book, it was challenging because I didn't know exactly how to get it out. Like I knew I was like, all right, let me write everything I can and get this thing on paper, on a tablet, on a, the computer, whatever. So I did that part. And I remember halfway through that process of just getting everything out of me, I remember my laptop actually breaking down. Before I had a MacBook, I had this Google Chrome. John broke down on me. I'm like, yo, what am I going to do? So I had an iPad mini at the time, and I started to type on my iPad mini every morning for an hour, as much as I can get out. And that was a very challenging process in itself, but I was able to do that. Once the actual manuscript was done, it was like, all right, what's the next steps? Like I didn't know. So I went over to somebody and I was like, hey, can you help me like publish this? Somebody I knew that was working in that field. And, they had the expertise, but they wanted to charge me, X amount of dollars that I just couldn't afford at the time. So I remember getting really discouraged at the time, like, oh man, I'm never going to get this story out. I prayed on it a little bit and then I hit up YouTube University and I'm like, yeah, I got to figure this thing out. I got to because somebody needs this message. And I did just that. Now, that first copy of my book, and I don't know if people know this, that first copy of my book was really rough. I'm gonna be honest. It was the formatting was off. It had typos. Like it was crazy, man. I actually went back in the book that everybody sees now, which is much more professional. I made that a second edition to the book. Right. Once I really learned, but I wouldn't have learned if I didn't just, go all in and get that thing out there. So I went all in. I tried to figure it out on my own, but I learned so much in the process on, ISBN numbers and this and that, and how to really get this thing professional to where you can have it in a Barnes and Nobles or something. And I learned that process through trial and error, but that doesn't happen if you don't start. If I'd have gave up when the laptop broke, that doesn't happen. If I'd have gave up when, this person told me it was X amount of thousands of dollars, it wouldn't have happened, right? I wouldn't have had a bestseller or anything because I would have stopped in that process. So just really digging in on the process and learning as much as you can from individuals like yourself and others is super huge.
Yeah, you dropped a couple of gems there. So we're gonna backtrack just a little bit, right? So the fact that you had the obstacles, but you didn't stop, that's number one. But number two, even though you didn't know what to do, you still did what you knew to do, right? So the manuscript, you reached out, you networked, you identified somebody, you said, hey, I'm gonna tap into YouTube University. You are not going to be denied, even though you didn't know what to do. And that speaks a lot to the will that's important, in terms of success. We know Dr. Eric Thomas, and so ET talks about average skill, phenomenal will, right? So having that will to go past the point of, okay, I don't know what I don't know, right, but I know what I do know, and I'm gonna go out and put that effort forward. So I love the fact that you shared that, and that's clutch, especially for the people that's listening who might get discouraged, because everyone who says that they're going to write a book and put a book out, they don't do it.
Facts.
But you did too. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's amazing. Who are your books for? Like, let's talk a little bit about your audience. Like,
Right.
you know, who are your books for? Let's go deep in terms of who could benefit from getting their hands on a copy of your books.
Yeah, right. So when I made the books, specifically in mind, I had young, like high school students. It was really for high school, young men, young women. Very specific. When I did I Love You, it was specifically for young men, around that high school, middle school age. Now, here's the power in focusing on that target, right? Because one, it allowed me to produce, high quality content because I know who I'm talking to.
Right.
But I love the analogy of, you have a tennis ball and you have this bucket of paint. You dip that thing in some paint and you throw it at your target. You hit your target, but the splatter is going to hit all around.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So now the book is reaching, women, men, educators. It's reaching outside of that, even, with Caucasian men and women. You know what I mean? It's reaching so many different people, but I'm really focused on this one person, right? I know what the avatar looks like. I'm focused on that person. I'm giving the message to that person, but everybody around that person is also being impacted. And that was a challenge at first. I'm like, yo, I want this for everybody. Everybody can gain value from this. And that's true. But I couldn't focus on everybody because it would have never got done. Right. And it would have been specific enough. So I really honed in on it. Really, honestly, if I can be honest, I wrote that book for myself at that age when I needed it. If I'm being honest, if I look at the person, that was me in high school that needed this book right here.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
That's who I wrote it for, and everybody else is just being impacted by it. So that's really what it's for.
I like that. So I just want you to know right now, I'm snatching that, that analogy about the paintball.
Oh, take that, bro.
I'm snatching that. Yeah, I typically talk about dartboards, what I'm saying? Like we go to a sports bar and and any sports bar you go to is always a dartboard, like right near the bathroom. And, people understand that because many people have been to sports bars, but I love that analogy about dipping a tennis ball in the paint and throwing it at your target, because it does splatter. Like it does impact other people. I like that. So as we begin to land the plane, Nate, talk about how can people get a copy of, or copies, right? Because we speak in multiple, right? How can people get copies of your book? Where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can get copies from the book directly from my website. It's nateevansjr.com. On every platform, I have Nate Evans Jr. from Instagram to LinkedIn, even TikTok. I'm on there too promoting, getting to it. But Nate Evans Jr. pretty much everywhere. You can grab the book from my website, nateevansjr.com. Or if you want to, you can also go to Amazon as well. It's on there as well.
I love it. Give us the names of your books again, and then any last words that you want to share with our listeners.
Absolutely. The names of the books. The first one is Building Muscle, Life is Your Trainer. Building Muscle, Life is Your Trainer. Super, super important. And then the next book is I Love You. And that one is Letters of Love from Black Men to Black Boys. One of my most just cherished, incredible projects, man, to have so many, amazing Black men be a part of that. And it's just really near and dear to my heart. So those are the two books. Last encouraging words is don't give up on your dreams, because you never know who's waiting on what you're building. And I share that because when I wrote my first book, like I said, it was super challenging. I had to figure it out. It was terrible, the formatting, but I had a young man who read my book, right? This young man, he was at the Covenant House in New Jersey. Young man, and I won't disclose his name or anything like that, but he was, homeless for lack of better words. And he was in there trying to get his recovery on and get things together for his life. He ended up getting a hold of this book and reading it about 10 times. And when I finally got to meet him in person, he said that this book saved his life. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's like, if I get discouraged and I don't go through when the trials come up, he doesn't get this, right? It's so much bigger than us. So again, don't give up on your dreams, because you never know who's waiting on what you're building. And that's super, super important.
Man, that's so powerful. And I'm so appreciative that we were able to connect. And my prayer is that this message goes out beyond us, even beyond us, our lives. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the most powerful thing about being an author, is that no matter how long you live, even in your death, your impact will be felt because of your book. So for those of you who are watching, if you're an author, you're an aspiring author, listen, listen to what Nate said. Go watch this episode again, internalize it, go get copies of his book. And matter of fact, even bring him to your organization. Let him know that you heard about him here on the Author Spotlight Self-Publishing 30 Days podcast, where I'm your host, Rob YB Youngblood, president of sales and your LinkedIn locksmith. Remember, be encouraged, be blessed, but most of all, be faithful over the gifts that you've been given, because your gift will actually make room for you. We'll see you on the next episode of the Author Spotlight. Peace.